May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to thee, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So if you noticed a shift in the readings today, we're getting more ethereal and mystical, and time is a little bit bended here and there. We have a reading from Revelation, and the word in Greek for revelation means an uncovering or a revealing. So revelation is a reveal. And the great reveal is a timeless metaphor of God's presence among us, which is what Jesus is trying to teach his disciples. Now, I have to fill in the concept of where our gospel comes from today, because this is at the Last Supper, so we've gone back in time now to Jesus sitting with his disciples. This is the Gospel of John, so we know that at the Last Supper, Jesus invites his disciples to sit down so that he can get on the ground and wash their feet. So he's showing them how to love one another. This is how you love one another. In other words, I get to wash your feet, and I'm on the floor in the dirt, and you put your dirty feet into my hands, which are on my lap, and then I wash them until they're clean, and I dry them with love. So love is physical, and it's humbling. And the fact that Jesus is down at the disciples' feet means he wants them to get the message. I want you humble at people's feet, people who you probably wouldn't want to associate with, and those are the feet that you're going to wash. And then he is doing all this Last Supper at a supper. And because this is the Gospel of John, and because of what he says about his time has come, this is the time. It reminds us of the first supper that he had in this Gospel, which was the wedding at Cana, when they suddenly ran out of wine, and Mary elbows her son, Jesus Christ, and says, "They've run out of wine, son." And he says, "Mother, it is not yet my hour." And this is his hour. So we are supposed to think of these instructions that he gives us have a lot to do with the meal that we're eating. The banquet at first was a wedding feast. The Last Supper is also a wedding feast, because this is where Jesus says that my time has come and the glory of God is happening right now. And the direct contact of this is that he has just dipped some bread in the olive oil and given it to the disciple Judas, who the narrator says, "And the devil entered him as he ate the bread, and he got up and left the room." And nobody understood what happened, but the narrator in John makes sure we understand, because he writes, the devil entered him at that moment, and he betrayed Jesus. So Jesus is saying, this is the verse right after that, "Now the glory of the Lord is upon me." Now is the glory. Now is the end, in other words. So what are we to make of this? You know, you can scratch your head a little bit. There's been lots of postulating. But because Jesus and our loving God, our Father, Mother, they work in a time that is not our human time. It's Kairos time, not Chronos time, and we can't separate the two because we're in our human body. But Jesus, by saying that now my glory has come, God is glorified in me, and God will glorify me in him, and we're the same thing, he's basically saying, when you are betrayed, and you will be betrayed, do it as I would do it. Know that everybody gets betrayed. If you're married, you have betrayed your partner at least once. Because we do. We hurt the ones we love, right? The most. And Jesus knows this. So when we're caught up in a family argument, know that this has happened to Jesus, and Jesus knows that God is in this moment, and God is glorified by how we enter into that moment. Most of us are not aware of what we're doing when we're betraying somebody, or we wouldn't be doing it. And a simple apology and saying, "I don't know what came over me," will suffice. But sometimes, like with Jesus, he knows he's going to be killed. He doesn't know how, maybe, but he knows this is the end. And he knows it's going to happen through betrayal, because he has an omniscient vision of what's going to happen. And betrayal is what happens. We also know that Jesus enters his death, resurrection, and ascension with this wholeness of God participating in it. That God in Jesus is God being betrayed, God being crucified on the cross, and God being ascended into heaven. This movement of raising him up is taken from this moment when Jesus knelt down to wash the disciples' feet. So the more humble we become, the more we serve others as Jesus would serve them, the better able we are to have God raise us up and not to try and pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Bootstraps is not a holy metaphor at all. Letting yourself be a slave to others, in other words, a servant of others, because the language was interchangeable in the Greek. So letting yourself be Jesus to other people whenever you can get your head around it, that's your job, is to be Jesus to other people. In those moments, you are closest to being a holy person. You're also a holy person by getting up and brushing your teeth. You're also a holy person by showing up and doing your job. If you inhabit your space in the gift that is given to you as if it is a gift, that by the grace of God we got to church this morning, by the grace of God we get to come up and receive Jesus, the eternal one, in the Holy Spirit, becoming the bread, becoming the wine, and becoming part of us. So this is the dinner, the feast in the wedding at Cana, and the feast in the Last Supper. They are both metaphors for what we do here in Holy Communion. We get on our knees as if to wash Jesus' feet, or we stand to receive. Either position is holy. However you get there is holy. And what we do when we consume Jesus is anyone's guess. Sometimes people experience a oneness, sometimes not. But it doesn't matter what feeling you have. What matters is that your body is going through the movements of what Jesus asked us to do. He said, remember me. Take this bread, take this wine, have supper together, and I am in the midst of you. Love one another, for God's sake. Amen.